Tonight, the stunning decision in the Trayvon Martin shooting.
I'm going to grant the motion, set bond in the amount of $150,000.
George Zimmerman granted bail and telling Trayvon's grieving parents this.
I wanted to say I am sorry for the loss of your son.
Freedom for the man accused of murder. Is it right? What does it say about the case against him? I'll ask high-profile judges from Florida. Plus, it was a tape that shocked the nation. Rodney King and the police beating that nearly burned down Los Angeles.
Can we all get along? Can we get along?
20 years after the not guilty verdict and the riots, what does King think about Trayvon and race and what it takes to keep America great? My exclusive interview ahead. And from Seinfeld to the second in command.
Hey, Sue, did the president call? No.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus having a ball as a vice president, but is she mocking Sarah Palin? I'll ask her. Then, only in America, a very pushy mother and the ghastly prom queen billboard for her daughter. This is Piers Morgan Tonight. Good evening. Our big story tonight. George Zimmerman granted bail and perhaps just hours away from freedom. The man charged with murdering Trayvon Martin will be released on just $150,000 bond. Zimmerman apologized publicly to Trayvon's parents in court today, and the prosecutor grilled him about it. Listen to this.
Why did you wait so long to tell Mr. Martin and the victim's mother, the father and mother, why did you wait so long to tell them?
I was told not to communicate with them.
Dramatic moments in court earlier today. We'll get to all the new details in just a moment. Also, Rodney King has a lot to say about Trayvon's case. In 1991, he was savagely beaten by police officers, the brutality captured on video. The officers were acquitted by a mostly white jury, and that set off days of riots across Los Angeles. 20 years later, Rodney King is with me tonight for an exclusive interview on keeping America great, Trayvon Martin, and what he thinks of the police today. And a little later, everyone's favourite sitcom star, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, on everything from Seinfeld to politics to her love life. We'll begin with our big story. George Zimmerman granted bail after saying sorry to Trayvon Martin's parents. With me now is Natalie Jackson, the co-counsel for the Martin family. And Natalie Jackson, obviously a pretty dramatic day today in many ways. What was the family's reaction to George Zimmerman being granted bail and also to his public apology?
Well, the family was prepared for George Zimmerman getting a bail. We talked to them about that. So they were prepared for that. What they weren't prepared for was for George Zimmerman to get on the stand and pretty much grandstand. We had talked about this yesterday. His attorney had reached out, and also his attorney made media statements that George wanted to meet the family. We said this was not the proper time or place at this point. So this is the first day that this family has been in court, and they've actually heard testimony, and they've seen the killer of their son. And so it was really emotional. It wasn't the proper time or place. And so it's easy to conclude this apology was not for the family. It was for George Zimmerman.
I suppose that looking at it from his point of view, he's been heavily criticized for not apologizing to date for what he did, and I suppose he thought it was the first opportunity that he had to do so. I mean, can you really blame him for wanting to do what everyone's been screaming at him to do?
Well, the apology is for the family, and if it's for the family and they tell you that's not the proper time or place, then you don't do it just because you've been criticized. That just leads to let everyone know that it was self-serving.
Obviously, the legal process is now started. The arrest happened as the family wanted. I've interviewed them several times, and I know that was the main thing they were after. If we now have a trial, and if George Zimmerman gets acquitted, in other words, a jury concludes that he was acting under the stand your ground law as it stands in Florida, how will the family feel about that? Are they prepared for that eventuality?
Well, this family has said all along that they have full faith in the justice system, and they believe in Angela Corey. They believe that Ms. Corey is ethical and she knows what she's doing, and our office knows what they're doing. And they don't believe that Ms. Corey would have brought this charge had not she believed that George Zimmerman was guilty of murdering their son. That being said, once again, all along, you've seen this family. This is a praying family, and they trust in God, and they trust in what happens, and they also trust and believe in the justice system, and that's what this legal team has told them. So what happens is up to Angela Corey's office, it's up to this judge, and it's up to God.
It was a very emotional day for the family. We could see, particularly, I thought, with Trayvon's father, seemed to be in tears for a lot of what he was listening to. Obviously, very hard for them to finally come face to face with the man who killed their son.
Yeah, it was. And I will tell you, we saw an interesting dynamic today. Is because normally Sabrina Fulton is the person that is the more emotional one. And today, it was really hard to sit by Tracy Martin as he hears information about the killing of his son and see him so full of emotion. Sabrina was comforting him.
Natalie Jackson, for now, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with me now are two former Florida judges, Karen Mills Francis and Larry Seidlin. Welcome to you both. Obviously, you're both very aware of Florida law. It seems that this will all come down to the stand your ground law and its application. But first, let me ask you, Judge Larry, what you thought of what happened today in court. You know, George Zimmerman being granted bail at $150,000. Would you have expected that, knowing Florida law as you do?
Well, it was a discretionary call by the judge. The judge has to be proved in front of the court. A bigger standard for the prosecutor, other than beyond a reasonable doubt like we have in a jury trial, here it has to be a presumption, a great presumption, that he's guilty of the crime. And then if there's substantial discrepancies in the evidence, the defendant has a right to bail. And here there were substantial discrepancies. But it was discretionary by the court. The judge could have ruled either way, and we could have backed up the judge by our legal analysis. There's politics in the judicial system. It permeates all parts of it. And as you know, the judge in Florida has to run for re-election every 6 years. The prosecutor, in this case, has to run every 4 years. And no one's blind to that. In America, there's two systems of justice. There's one system for the black population, and there's one system for the white population. And many times, the black folks get a shorter end of the stick in our justice system. And I saw it when I was in juvenile court. They would make an arrest of a juvenile for a shoplifting case, where if it was a white boy committing the crime, his parents would get a phone call and not have to go through the criminal justice system.
Yeah, let me bring in Judge Karen there. I mean, strong words there from Judge Larry. Do you agree with what he just said?
Pierce, I have been in the legal community in Miami for well over 20 years. We have so many cases set for author hearing in Dade County that we have a judge assigned just to hear author hearing cases. And what I saw today in that courtroom was one of the most inept hearings that I have ever seen. It was very hard for me to believe that this case, with all the national attention, the prosecutor calls in one detective, and his first word was, "I didn't expect to testify today." The way the prosecutor questioned the detective, it sounded like he had been handed the file this morning. You have to remember, a week or so ago, we hear Angela Corey tell us she did an intensive investigation, and I believe she did an intensive investigation. We got to remember, the governor took this case away from the prosecutor in Seminole County. He took this case away from the investigators in Seminole County, but that's who we heard from today. It's real obvious because it's left everybody feeling, oh, they don't really have a case. I think what was very obvious is that this prosecutor didn't know about the evidence. This prosecutor doesn't know what the FBI investigation came up with. This prosecutor doesn't know anything about forensics. He tries to bring in some conflicting testimony that the defendant has given, and we couldn't even hear that. But there was one thing that I did hear today that made a lot of sense to me. We heard him say that Zimmerman said that Trayvon had his hand on his mouth and his nose, and he was able to break away, grab his gun, and shoot him. Well, then how do you account for those 12 or 15 cries for help? I have said from the beginning that this case comes down to who's crying for help on that 911 tape. The prosecutor said today, we have FBI evidence about the tape. Why didn't they introduce that today? 101 in law school, you learn that Florida is a wide open cross-examination state. What that means is that you are not limited in your cross-examination by what is brought out in direct testimony. So this grandstanding today to allow Zimmerman to get on the stand and make a statement and then basically not be able to cross-examine him, I have never seen that in my life. He may as well have just sat on the stand and say, I'm innocent.
Well, fascinating assessment there from two judges who know that state very well. For now, Judge Larry Seidlin and Judge Karen Mills-Francis, thank you both very much. I want to bring in two well-known Florida attorneys to weigh in now on our big story. It's trial lawyer Roy Black and Jeff Ashton, former prosecutor and author of the book Imperfect Justice. Fascinating comments there, I thought, from the two judges who know Florida well. Let me start with you, if I may, Jeff Ashton. As a former prosecutor, did they have a point there? I mean, what did you make of what they were saying?
Well, I don't really agree with at least the last commentator. You know, it is not unusual at all for a witness, the cross-examination of a witness, to be limited based on what's asked in direct. That happens every day in the courtrooms I've been in. So I was not at all surprised that Judge Lester didn't allow free rein to the prosecution in questioning on cross-examination. So I felt that this Arthur hearing was handled about as I expected. I didn't expect the prosecutor to present a whole lot of evidence. I expected them to present the affidavit. To correct one of the judges who just spoke, the defense called the investigator, not the prosecutor, and the defense seemed very prepared to cross-examine essentially the investigator about what he said in the affidavit and why, and then thought that was done very well. But I felt the prosecution in this case planned on presenting as little as they needed to in order to have the Arthur hearing. So I don't agree with the last two commentators that this was somehow done incompetently. It didn't seem that way to me at all.
Roy Black, you've been a defense attorney for many years. Would you be confident if you were defending George Zimmerman now from everything you've seen, read and heard?
Well, Piers, I was really sort of shocked watching this hearing. I mean, the state gave these press conferences. They give excellent press conferences saying they do this very detailed examination. They charge this man with murder, yet they back it up with nothing in court. They say this man is a danger to the community, so he shouldn't be released, and they don't present any evidence that proves any of that. I mean, I'm very shocked that the state did not put forth any real evidence to support this charge.
I mean, does that mean they don't have any evidence, or does it mean they're holding it back for the full trial? I mean, what does your gut tell you?
Well, it may be they're holding it back, but how can you go in as an elected prosecutor saying we've charged this man with murder? Not only that, but we think he's a danger to the community, so we ought to keep him in jail. But then not to present any evidence to prove that. That's what lawyers do. Our job is to come to court and present evidence to a judge in a bail hearing like this. The judge wasn't presented with any evidence that this man was a danger to the community. He wasn't presented with any real evidence that this man was guilty of murder. How do you expect a judge to do a decent job in making a ruling when you don't give him any evidence?
Yeah, it's certainly a fascinating case. Today was just one of many dramatic days, and I guess we'll all just have to wait and see how this trial unravels. But for now, Jeff Ashton and Roy Black, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been 21 years since another infamous case of race and violence galvanized the country. The beating of Rodney King, still disturbing to watch. A black motorist had been pulled over by white police officers following a car chase. Despite a brutal beating caught on tape, the officers were found not guilty, and Los Angeles erupted into days of looting and rioting. And joining me now is Rodney King. Rodney, the Trayvon Martin case must bring back a lot of memories for you and engender many emotions. What do you feel about it?
Well, you know, I feel that the pain, you know, that the family's going through. It brought back memories from 20 years ago, you know. But I know that how the justice system works, you know, it's a slow process, but it does work, you know what I mean, with the tools and the way the law is set in place. it's just a slow process. It's the most frustrating part is the wait, you know, and because of how the law works in the country. But I don't want to jump to any conclusions.
Do you believe that race was a big factor in the Trayvon Martin case? Do you think that George Zimmerman was a racist who targeted Trayvon because he was black?
Well, what I think is the rules are old, and a lot of them are outdated. And some people who tries to get on the police's side, to be too friendly, over friendly, to make themselves likable, and they have a lot of common sense and a little smarts about them. They know the law. Sometimes they take the law into their own hands and they take it too far. And, law enforcement gets to a point where they say, well, we're tired of doing our beatings. We're tired of doing the killing. So we're getting blamed for it. So we're going to leave it into the citizens' hands.
I mean, the big question for this case, I think, is would George Zimmerman have shot Trayvon Martin if he didn't know the stand your ground law existed, which could then protect him?
Some people know the law and they'll go right to the edge and what they can get away with. In this case, it's no different. It's no different. This is a case where the family deserves justice, bottom line. And
what do you feel about Trayvon's family? I mean,
I feel sorry for him, man. That was just a baby. It's just a baby, and I feel sorry that he had to pay with his life for that type of law. And here's this. It's just gotta wait. We just gotta wait and see how things turn out, and just hold on to our tempers and keep our country together like we're supposed to be. But we got to get through it and make sure that this never happens again. I'll never be able to hold a gun, and I'm a felon. So I mean, if I had a gun to say, and I can represent myself on hold my ground, I don't know how my mind would change. I don't know, but I know that some of those rules need to be changed, and especially that stand your ground law for some of the people who can hold a gun, because some people shouldn't even have a gun.
I think that's very true. Let's come back and talk more about this.